fairly well recognised that this sector is really quite resource poor, which really adds to the value of collaboration between services. No one organisation is able to adequately deal with every single issue that might come to them for an individual with mental illness. So it's important to collaborate with other services to ensure effective and efficient service delivery and a holistic approach to the individual's issues.
Stigma and discrimination is real and part of the everyday life of people with mental illness.
Stigma is one of the most difficult issues that we deal with within mental health. There's a lot of misrepresentation of mental illness within the media, within movies. There's a lot of unfortunate history within mental health that we're working past. And given that the opinion of most people of mental illness, when it's not something that you can actually see, people have the misunderstanding that people with a mental illness are a greater risk of violence when they're usually far more a risk to themselves than to anybody else. And the stigma that's attached to it often discourages people from actually disclosing any of their mental health concerns or of talking about it.
First, I think it's important to remember that as lawyers, we aren't medical specialists. We don't have expertise in mental health, and we shouldn't expect ourselves to appreciate or have a thorough or detailed understanding of different diagnoses, the different medications or different symptoms that individuals might experience if they have a mental illness. And certainly we shouldn't consider ourselves not fully equipped or trained to assist an individual just because we don't have a thorough understanding of the different types of mental illness. For example, a general understanding is more than enough, is generally appropriate to assist an individual, and a general understanding of how a mental illness can impact on an individual, the fact that different individuals can experience mental illness in different ways, and that mental illness and medication can fluctuate quite significantly over time as well. Second, I think it's also important, very important, to remember to treat the individual not as a mentally ill person, but rather as any other individual who may be experiencing symptoms of a mental illness that are beyond their control. It's important not to consider or to view the individual or anything that they're saying through the lens of mental illness. It's also important, of course, to be conscious of capacity issues. So the lawyer should be remembering that a mental illness might impact on an individual's capacity to make certain decisions or to give instructions about certain matters. So it's important for the lawyer to remember their fundamental ethical duties and, of course, start from the assumption that the individual does have capacity. The lawyer should, of course, also remember that they can and should take steps to maximise the individual's capacity when assisting the individual. There are a lot of factors that can be taken into account when considering capacity issues, and these are outlined in more detail, for example, in the Queensland Handbook for Practitioners on Legal Capacity. Of course, the Queensland Law Society's Ethics Centre can also provide guidance on these matters. And the same sorts of questions can also be asked about medication. Other questions that you might want to ask about a medication as well might include, for example, when the client has to take medication and how often, because medication may have side effects on the individual and may impact on their ability to participate in an appointment with the lawyer. In all cases, it may be more appropriate to leave discussion about mental illness, diagnosis, symptoms and medication towards later on in the discussion, so that the lawyer has had the opportunity to build a bit more rapport and trust and confidence in the individual. When assisting individuals with mental illness, it's important to remember that legal issues don't exist in a vacuum. An individual with mental illness often will face multiple complex and compounding legal and non-legal issues. It's fairly well recognised now that it's important to provide holistic access to justice and to take a holistic approach to the individual's legal and non-legal issues, and that a failure to do so might mean that legal issues resurface again in the future. A good way to achieve holistic access to justice and approach to services is through collaboration. So collaboration between legal and non-legal services is invaluable to ensure that all the individual's legal and non-legal issues are appropriately dealt with. To ensure that a collaborative relationship remains strong and that the relationship remains effective and as efficient as possible, it's important to continue engaging in regular discussions with the other legal and non-legal services. That might be in person, over the telephone, by email, to foster an ongoing effective relationship.
Well, it's about talking to them, and you have to obviously ask their permission. So it takes some explanation. So you want to, I usually will approach this and say, not saying, oh, can I bring a lawyer into the room? That usually can be off-putting to some people, but more talking about the advocacy clinic and its multidisciplinary stance, and we have a team of people that include social workers, lawyers, and medical students. And that's really important, that they see that this is a group of people who are looking to advocate on their behalf, to help them with whatever that social, ethical, legal issue is.
There certainly are benefits in using tools such as the legal health check. Individuals with mental illness may not fully appreciate or recognise the multiple legal and non-legal issues that are relevant to their circumstances, or they might prioritise particular issues and fail to raise other issues when meeting with a lawyer. While general conversation skills and sufficient probing might be enough in some circumstances to identify all relevant issues, it may not necessarily identify all the non-legal and legal issues involved in a person's circumstances. Tools such as the legal health check can ensure that the lawyer does identify all relevant issues, and to ensure that a holistic approach is taken to dealing with the individual's issues.
I think it's very important to get a broad perspective on your client's strengths, and that can be asking quite broad, open-ended questions. So to avoid the risk of just seeing your client through the prism or the gaze of their mental illness and go broader than that. So you're needing to know them as a person, which is going to be important if capacity issues come up, but also in painting to a court or a tribunal the breadth of the person's strengths. So you need to find out those. So people, whilst having a mental illness, may also identify as being a carer for a parent, or they might have a particular hobby and the like. So that's important, and you need to know their networks as to where you might be wanting to refer later on.
It's always important to encourage an individual to manage their own mental well-being. Many individuals with persistent long-term mental illness in particular might feel a sense of lack of control or powerlessness, and that they aren't being listened to. The approach that the lawyer takes should recognise the importance and value of instilling a sense of confidence, a sense of control and self-determination within the individual that they are assisting. So it's important to encourage the individual, wherever possible, to take steps to managing their own mental well-being, as well as other legal and non-legal issues wherever they can. Build the confidence, build the individual's capacity to manage their own lives, and build the skills by providing the advice, the information and the guidance that they need to ensure that they are adequately equipped to avoid these issues in future. Some common misconceptions when assisting a client from other services is, for example, some individuals, particularly non-legal services, might misunderstand the role of the lawyer and expect the lawyer to take a particularly adversarial approach to their dealings with other services. If that's the case, the other services, they may disengage or shut the lawyer out and may be less willing to assist the lawyer in assisting the individual. To avoid these circumstances, it's typically best to clearly educate and provide a clear understanding to the other non-legal services about the role of the lawyer, and clearly acknowledge the importance of respecting and preserving therapeutic relationships that the individual has with these other non-legal services.
The ethical approach of do no harm is very, very important. So the support network that the person has prior to, which includes the treating teams and case managers and support services and family, etc., you want that to still be intact when you leave. Lawyers are often there for a specific issue or issues. They're referred, they come in, they take instructions, they become familiar with the network, what's working for the person, what's not working so well for the person, and then leave when that issue is addressed. So if you're coming heavy-handed with an adversarial approach or assuming that everyone else is not on the side of the patient, that it's only you, that's extraordinarily unrealistic and can be damaging.
1 in 5 people has a mental illness at some stage in their life and needs mental health support. When that person is unwell, often things can happen. They can be subject to trauma, they can have a range of issues with their employment or things, and they can then get caught in either a financial or a lifestyle or a personal crisis, to the point that it's extremely difficult to try and manage their way out of that unsupported and or to manage their way through the situation, and then the stress of that situation can compound and can make their actual illness worse. So stress being one of the highest risk factors for mental illness and for relapse, that if the stress of the circumstance that because of their illness they've managed to get into can actually make the illness progress further and can then lead them into deeper and more complicated legal situations.
There are a number of benefits from or to assisting an individual with mental illness. Often, in my experience, the individual comes to you and has a sense of hopelessness or lack of control, or the sense that they haven't been listened to, and they're in circumstances that are perhaps beyond their control. They didn't have a choice to be in this position, and the opportunity to assist the individual to build their own capacity, to take control of their lives and to really fully engage in healthy community life is really thoroughly rewarding. Having individuals contact you after hearings before the tribunal, for example, explaining how beneficial it has been to them, being in contact with the lawyer, having someone to assist them along that process is incredibly rewarding.